In the quiet Siberian town of Barnaul, a chilling legend had persisted for decades, whispered among the locals and passed down through generations. Every few years, on the night of March 4th to 5th, just before the anniversary of Stalin's death, a ghostly steam locomotive was said to appear at the Barnaul railway station. This spectral train, with its tender, mail, and to passenger cars, could only be seen from one precise spot, a small patch on the bridge connecting Second Stroitelnaya and Priviksalnaya streets. A step to the left or right, and the vision would vanish into the night. It was early spring, and the chill in the air felt heavier than usual, as if carrying the weight of untold stories. Ivan Petrov, a local historian with a keen interest in the supernatural, had heard the tales all his life. He had always been skeptical, dismissing the stories as nothing more than folklore. But this year, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a deep sense of foreboding, he decided to witness the phenomenon for himself. As the clock struck midnight, Ivan positioned himself at the exact spot on the bridge. The night was eerily silent, the usual sounds of the city muted as if in anticipation. He strained his ears, trying to catch any hint of the supernatural. Minutes passed, and just as he was about to give up, he heard at a distant, mournful whistle, unlike any train he had ever heard. The sound grew louder, accompanied by the rhythmic chugging of an old steam engine. Through the mist that had begun to form, Ivan saw the outline of the locomotive materialize. It was an ancient model, its dark iron frame glinting in the moonlight, the steam billowing out like ghostly tendrils. The train slowed to a stop at the station, and the doors of the passenger cars clanked open. Shadows moved inside, and Ivan could hear the muffled sounds of people shouting, though he couldn't make out the words. The figures were dressed in outdated uniforms, hurriedly throwing bags from wide, squat station trolleys into the mail car. Ivan's heart pounded in his chest as he watched, unable to look away. The air around him grew colder, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled out his notebook, jotting down every detail he could observe, hoping to find some explanation later. But deep down, he knew that what he was witnessing was beyond the realm of the natural. As he stood there, a feeling of dread washed over him. He had heard rumors that those who saw the ghost train were marked, drawn into its mysterious and tragic past, but he dismissed the thought, focusing instead on the scene unfolding before him. The train seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, the windows of the passenger cars glowing with an ethereal light. Ivan strained to see inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the passengers. He could just make out shadowy figures, their faces obscured, but their presence felt overwhelmingly real. One figure, taller than the others, seemed to turn and look directly at Ivan. Even from a distance, he could feel the intensity of the gaze, as if it were piercing through him. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The once muted shouts became clearer, and Ivan could now hear snippets of conversation, frantic, desperate. "We must leave now," one voice urged. "They're coming for us," another cried out. The urgency in their voices sent a wave of fear through Ivan. Who were they fleeing from? And why? The train's whistle blew again, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the night. The doors slammed shut, and the engine began to chug once more, slowly pulling away from the station. As the train disappeared into the mist, Ivan was left standing in the cold, his mind racing with questions. Determined to uncover the truth, Ivan spent the next few days delving into Barnaul's history. He pored over old newspapers, archives, and records, searching for any clues about the ghostly train. What he found was a dark and tragic story from the days of Stalin's purges. In March of 1953, just days before Stalin's death, a train carrying political prisoners had left Barnaul, bound for a gulag in the far north. The train had never reached its destination, vanishing without a trace in the wilderness. The prisoners had included dissidents, intellectuals, and anyone deemed a threat to the regime. Among them was a prominent scientist, Dr. Alexei Novikov, who had been working on a top-secret project. According to the records, Novikov had crucial information that could have changed the course of history, and it was believed that the train had been ambushed by Stalin's secret police to ensure his silence. Ivan realized that the ghostly train was trapped in a loop, reliving the night of its disappearance. The figures he had seen were the restless spirits of those who had perished, unable to move on. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. He had to find a way to help them. As the next anniversary approached, Ivan returned to the bridge, armed with newfound knowledge and a plan. He hoped to communicate with the spirits, to understand their plight and perhaps offer them some peace. But as he stood on that fateful spot, waiting for the ghost train to appear, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The night grew colder, and the mist began to form once more. The distant whistle echoed through the darkness, and the ghostly train emerged from the shadows. Ivan braced himself, ready to confront the spirits and uncover the truth. But as the train pulled into the station, something was different. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, and the shadowy figures moved with even more urgency. Ivan could hear the voices clearly now, and they were calling out his name. Panic surged through him as he realized that the spirits were aware of his presence, and they were reaching out to him, pleading for his help. Ivan took a deep breath, stepping closer to the edge of the bridge. He called out to the spirits, asking them to show him what had happened that night. The scene before him shifted, and he was no longer an observer but a participant, drawn into the tragic events of the past. The ghostly figures surrounded him, their faces now visible and etched with fear. Drive. Novikov stood at the forefront, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. Ivan felt a surge of determination. He had to find a way to free them, to break the cycle of their torment. But as he reached out to touch the train, the scene around him began to distort, the voices growing louder and more frantic. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and the air was filled with the scent of smoke and burning coal. Ivan's heart raced as he realized that he was on the brink of uncovering the truth, but at a great personal cost. The last thing he saw before the world went black was the haunting face of Dr. Novikov, his eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed to span the decades. When Ivan awoke, he was lying on the bridge, the mist gone and the night eerily silent once more. The ghost train had vanished, leaving only a lingering sense of loss and unfinished business. Ivan knew that he had come close to the truth, but he had only scratched the surface of the mystery. Determined to find the answers, he vowed to return next year, better prepared and with a deeper understanding of the forces at play. But as he walked away from the bridge, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was now a part of the legend, forever entwined with the fate of the ghostly train and its restless passengers. The story of the ghost train at Barnaul station was far from over, and Ivan was now at the heart of it, driven by a relentless quest for truth and a desire to bring peace to the haunted souls. But he knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, and the answers he sought might come at a great personal cost. Ivan spent the following year preparing for his next encounter with the ghost train, immersing himself in research and reaching out to experts in paranormal activity and Soviet history. He unearthed details about the political climate of 1953, uncovering chilling accounts of Stalin's purges and the secret police's brutal methods. Each new piece of information only deepened his resolve to free the trapped spirits. As the anniversary approached, Ivan received an unexpected visitor. An elderly woman, her eyes sharp despite her age, introduced herself as Natalia Sokolov, a former archivist who had worked in Barnaul during the early 1950s. She had heard of Ivan's interest in the ghost train and claimed to have crucial information that could help him. Dr. Novikov was not just any prisoner, Natalia revealed one evening, her voice low and conspiratorial. He had discovered something that could have undermined the entire Soviet regime. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was something far more dangerous. He knew secrets that could topple the government. Ivan's heart pounded as Natalia continued. The train was carrying more than just prisoners. It had documents, artifacts, and evidence that could expose the darkest aspects of Stalin's rule. That's why it was ambushed. They didn't want that information to reach the outside world. Natalia handed Ivan a faded, leather-bound journal. This belonged to Dr. Novikov. It might hold the key to understanding what happened that night. As Ivan delved into the journal, he found detailed notes about Novikov's research and the political machinations that led to his imprisonment. There were references to a secret project, codenamed Operation Oprechnik, which seemed to be at the heart of the mystery. The more Ivan read, the clearer it became that Novikov's work had the potential to change the course of history. March 4th arrived, and Ivan, armed with Novikov's journal and Natalia's insights, returned to the bridge. The night was cold and clear, the stars twinkling above like silent witnesses. Ivan felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread as he stood on the exact spot where the ghost train would appear. Midnight came, and the familiar whistle echoed through the night. The ghostly locomotive emerged from the mist, and Ivan could feel the air crackle with energy. This time, he was ready. Clutching the journal, he stepped closer, determined to make contact with the spirits. The scene before him unfolded much as it had the previous year, but this time Ivan shouted above the din, calling out Dr. Novikov's name. The ghostly figure turned, his eyes locking onto Ivan's with a mixture of recognition and desperation. Ivan held up the journal. "Dr. Novikov, I have your journal. I know about Operation Oprechnik. Show me what happened that night." The air around him seemed to shimmer, and the scene shifted. Ivan found himself aboard the train, surrounded by the frightened prisoners. He could hear the distant rumble of approaching trucks. The secret police were closing in. Novikov appeared beside him, his spectral form flickering with urgency. "We don't have much time." Novikov's voice was a whisper carried on the wind. "You must find the hidden compartment in the mail car. It's the key to everything." Ivan followed Novikov's instructions, moving through the chaotic scene to the mail car. He could hear the shouts of the secret police growing louder, the sense of impending doom palpable. Inside the car, Ivan located a false panel and pried it open, revealing a cache of documents, photographs, and strange artifacts. The train jolted, and Ivan knew he was running out of time. He grabbed as much as he could, feeling a strange energy emanating from the artifacts. Just as he turned to leave, the ghostly scene dissolved, and Ivan found himself back on the bridge, clutching a handful of old papers and photographs that had inexplicably materialized in his hands. Breathless and shaken, Ivan examined his prize. The documents detailed horrific experiments and covert operations, implicating high-ranking officials in atrocities that had been buried by history. There were also maps and codes, seemingly leading to other hidden caches of evidence. As Ivan processed the implications, he felt a presence beside him. Natalia had returned, her expression grave. "You've done it, Ivan. But this is only the beginning. There are more secrets to uncover, more ghosts that need to be laid to rest." Ivan nodded, realizing that his quest was far from over. The ghost train had given him a glimpse into a dark and dangerous past, but the full truth was still out there, waiting to be discovered. And with it, the chance to finally bring peace to the restless spirits and justice to the victims of Stalin's terror. The night was quiet once more, but the air still hummed with unresolved tension. Ivan knew that the next steps would be even more perilous, but he was ready. The ghostly train and its tragic cargo had entrusted him with their secrets, and he would not rest until he had uncovered the full story and brought their tormentors to light. Ivan continued his investigation with renewed determination. The original documents found in the mail car turned out to be the key to solving numerous mysteries related to the missing train and its passengers. With the help of Natalia and several trusted colleagues, he began to decrypt maps and codes, hoping to find the rest of the hidden caches. It took several months before they were able to discover the first of the many places marked on the maps. In an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Barnaul, Ivan and his team found even more documents and evidence confirming the horrors committed during the Stalinist repressions. Each new hiding place brought more and more information, which formed a mosaic picture of tragedies that occurred many years ago. The collected evidence allowed Ivan and his team to contact international human rights organizations. As a result of careful work and cooperation with historians and lawyers from different countries, it was possible to compile a complete dossier on those who were behind Operation Oprechnik. Official investigations began soon after, and some of the survivors of the crackdown were brought to justice. But for Ivan, the main thing was not to punish the guilty, but to help the souls stuck between the worlds. On the eve of the next anniversary of Stalin's death, he returned to the bridge again, where he once saw a ghost train. He felt that he was getting closer to solving this tragedy. When the clock struck midnight, Ivan heard the same whistle of the locomotive again. But this time, instead of feeling fear and anxiety, he felt calm and confident. The train appeared, and Ivan, holding new evidence and documents in his hands, came closer. He saw familiar figures. Dr. Novikov and other passengers. They looked more calm, as if they were waiting for him to appear. Ivan raised his hand and said loudly, "I found the truth. Your story will be heard. You are free." The faces of the passengers lit up with gratitude, and the figures began to gradually disappear, dissolving into the morning light. The train stopped, and its horn sounded for the last time, farewell and liberating. Ivan stood on the bridge, feeling the weight of the past finally subside. He knew that he had done everything possible to bring justice and peace to the souls who had suffered for so long. The story of the ghost train in Barnaul was no longer just a scary legend. She has become a symbol of the power of truth and the relentless pursuit of justice. Years later, Ivan and Natalia wrote a book about their discoveries, which became an international bestseller and helped many people learn about the terrible events hidden in the darkness of history. A memorial was erected at the site of the ghost train's appearance, reminding that the truth will always find its way. Ivan continued his work as a historian and human rights activist, but now his research has been illuminated by the light of those whose souls he helped liberate. His journey to the truth was over, but the memory of those who suffered lived in the hearts of people who finally learned the truth.